This is Main Street with Gary Allen. Now, here's Gary.
And good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whichever time you're watching this particular program. We appreciate it very much, and welcome to Main Street. Yes, I am Gary Allen, your host, and I'd like to also thank right off the bat my producer on site, Mr. Tommy Sitt, for taking the time to always produce this show for us every week. Next week, we have Don Most coming on, and then the following week, we have Stephanie Powers, and then after that, we have our Christmas special. I won't be here. I'm going to be out of town visiting family, but Dave Lamont and Jeff DeForest, along with Tommy, will take care of all the festivities for the show. I think you'll enjoy the show. They're already telling me some of the things they've got mapped out for us, so I think it'll be exciting. Also want to thank Rick DelVecchio, our executive producer of this program. I also would like to thank the Japanese Gardens of South Florida for their continued support of this particular program. Also, a quick reminder, Tuesday nights at 7 p.m., you can find us on dbtv.tv, which is also on Roku, Amazon Fire, and Smart TV, as well as our own YouTube channel, which we'll be talking about as we go a little further along. Today, we have a very interesting guest, a gentleman who has been a friend of mine for a number of years. He's one of the foremost voiceover announcers in the business, as well as a game show announcer, game show host. He also would warm up an audience, which is, if you have never gone to a game show or any show to watch it being produced, the warm-up act is the most important part of the whole day in spite of the show. It really is, because if the warm-up guy doesn't get the audience ready to rock and roll, then it could not necessarily always go as planned. And this is one of the foremost top warm-up acts in the business. He's also an author, an anchor, an actor, an announcer, radio personality. He has written a number of books about Johnny Olson, Voice to Live, Voice, and he's also written another book. He comes to us just coming off of some of the biggest host as an award show. He's been on shows such as The Newlywed Game. He's also been on the, let's see, what do we got here? The Newlywed Game, Dead or Deal or No Deal, The Big Spin, Wheel of Fortune. No, The Weakest Link, Wheel of Fortune, Travel Pursuit. He's also done the Family Feud. He's been on the Game Show Network, CBS, NBC, ABC, and many, many more. He is a dear friend. Also, by the way, he also was on, I keep saying The Newlywed Game, but also, why can't I think of this name? Randy and I will talk about it in just a couple of minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, the hypnotist himself, Mr. Randy West.
Well, after a buildup like that, I mean, normally you just hear that at a eulogy or something, it just makes you feel like I should have died to get all that praise. So thank you.
If you'd like to lay down, that's fine, except my rates go up at that particular point. The price is right.
Reminds me of a woman I dated once. When she lay down, the price went up. Yeah.
By the way, The Price is Right is what I was thinking of, the show that you have done so much for.
Yeah. I had a thrill working with Bob Barker, giving away a new car and all the other fun stuff.
He's a good guy. I know Drew Carey. I've met Drew Carey many, many times at the Improv and over the years. I had a roommate who looked like Drew Carey. As a matter of fact, he was a Drew Carey impersonator, and he met Drew himself. And he was really surprised because Billy was like 6 foot tall and Drew is not 6 foot tall by any stretch. And he was really shy. He said, "Gary, why didn't you tell me the man was short?" I said, "What, ruin the illusion? It's like, it's like going on your first date. Honey, drop your pants." What?
What kind of show is this, Gary? Exactly. What did I sign in for here? What is it?
Well, by the way, I like the apartment. The last time I saw you on, of course, you were on with Jeffrey. It looked like, are you in a different part of the house than the last time you did the show?
Different part of the house. This is a big 4-bedroom, 3-story monster of a home. And the desktop moves periodically just because I like the view from this room versus that room. Yeah.
Well, I wish I had pursued what you did when I got to LA instead of the crazy stuff that I pursued, the acting world, because I knew darn well, even back with the Groundlings, I wasn't going to really go anywhere, but nevertheless, there it was. But
Well,
you
I
and I
felt like
both,
I had no choice. I had met Johnny Olson when I was a teenager back in New York, and he
yeah,
encouraged me to, to enter the field and kind of pursue the career that may take me somewhere to the near what he was doing. I never imagined I would ever stand in his footsteps at The Price is Right, at his
yeah.
podium, using his dressing room. It's freaking amazing, kind of cosmic symmetry. But I felt that I had no choice. That was like the goal and the pursuit that I had. So it was focused for me very early, very early.
Yeah, mine was radio when
Mhm.
my initial goal in life fell apart after I got out of the Air Force to be an airline pilot like my dad and his brothers. I had tried to pursue something else, so I got on a college radio station as a guest talking about Vietnam, and I went, oh, huh? Huh? I think that I think I can do this. And so I changed my major, which was general studies, and I went on to get my degree in broadcast journalism. Which, by the way, wallpapers one of these walls here somewhere.
I was
Uh,
going to say general studies doesn't sound that much more specific. I knew general studies when he was a sergeant. So, I've been
yes,
around a
yes.
long time. Yes.
Oh, yes, yes. And then he rose through the ranks immediately and became general studies. But no, I mean, you're liberal. Your first 2 years in college are generally your liberal arts, and you're not really concentrating on your major at all yet. And that's what happened to me. And I was lucky enough to I was at George Washington University in DC. Then I transferred down when I got out of the Air Force to the University of Miami, which is my alma mater, and I love the U very much. Um, but my whole career was in radio, primarily in South Florida, and
Mhm.
I know you began in radio.
Yeah, that
And
was
it,
the great entry point for a lot of entertainers and people who wanted to be
yeah,
in broadcasting. It was the most accessible. I mean, there are 8,000 radio stations, and there's
yeah,
always somebody, looking to take a minimum wage job doing overnights and sweeping up and emptying the paper from the teletype machine and changing the ribbon and all that stuff. So yeah, you start low and you work your way up. And thankfully, I was able to get myself to Los Angeles as a disc jockey, and then I had the access to the television shows that I felt were, my what can I say, my passion and where I felt I belonged, my fate, my
yeah.
kismet, if you will. Yeah.
I think I probably, if I had tried to do warm up and stuff, I probably would have been okay at it too. But for some reason, I didn't. I don't know why. I don't think it was ever presented to me. I don't think I ever thought about it, until after the fact. But my point being that back when you and I got started in radio, and I'm a little bit older than you, it was easy to get a job, your first job in radio, in the sense of walking in and somebody will give you a try doing weekends. They'll train you a little bit and see how you do. You can cut your teeth on this station, that station, and fumble around a little bit. And but today, it isn't like that anymore.
No, it
Today,
isn't.
you can try to find a job in radio, even for experienced broadcasters,
Yeah, well,
is almost impossible.
it's unbelievable. Two things have happened. Well, one big thing has happened. Two companies bought like 12,000 radio stations, and now
Yeah.
they're the banking and the finance and everything's turned upside down for them. So they're both, if they're not in bankruptcy, they're skating right around it, and they keep laying people off, which is a sad thing because it's kind of killed a once great medium. Radio is an exciting place to be and an exciting place
Yes.
to listen to, and it was a big part of a lot of people's lives, as well as an entry point into the entertainment business. But it's not that anymore.
Well,
Unfortunately, there are guys who are sitting in a radio station doing a local shift and then voice tracking for other cities. It's
yeah.
it's a shame because there's no local content, there's no
Yeah.
live energy to it at all. So sad that radio is gone, but television, thankfully, is still surviving. And in fact, I
Yeah.
just did a show that's going to air on this coming Friday, right after Thanksgiving. It's the
Yeah.
11th annual Reality Television Awards. And it is an amazing show for those who love, Big Brother and Amazing Race and Housewives, and the cooking shows and
Yeah.
all these competitions. And it's an amazing couple of hours of all the folks that you've seen on TV accepting their awards for best shows and best this and best that and best
I have
performer.
never been a big
Great.
fan of reality, but to me, now, Randy, if I'm wrong,
Yeah.
I mean, because I've had a couple of producers on here who have produced reality shows over the years. The one set of shows that I do not like, okay, and I'll state this right up front, are the Housewives of Anywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, those shows are just, and I was really shocked that Elaine from The Young and the Restless, um, she went on that one show, The Housewives of Beverly Hills. I was like, what are you doing? You're an actress. You're an accomplished actress on the
Yeah.
Y&R. You have daytime Emmys, et cetera, et cetera. What are you doing? I know Van Patten's doing his gambling thing, but you're not poor.
No, no, people love exposure. I can't speak to it because I don't watch those shows either, but
Yeah,
it's a big part of viewership. A lot of folks are hooked on these shows. It's like an appeal of a soap opera, I guess, except that
yeah.
it's real. And, it's actual crazy people, acting out. And I think there's call it a freak show if you like, but there's an audience for it. And it's a huge audience. A huge
Yes.
audience. All this is unscripted. It's not really, the award show that airs this coming Friday is called the Reality TV Awards, but in reality, no pun intended, it's unscripted television. So it includes some game shows as well, and Shark Tank, which is not like a Real Housewives kind of thing. So it's a vast area of
Oh, the guys
television.
from Shark Tank were on there?
Yeah, we got the Shark Tank was up for some awards. I can't announce who won what yet.
Oh,
But,
no, I understand it, but those guys are cool. I love to watch
yeah.
that show.
Yeah, that's
Because
it's a wide area of television. All that.
But the reason I
unscripted.
like to watch it is because they show the wife and the secretary, and that's well worth watching for anyway.
Well,
Just
that sounds like
between
a
me.
Chuck Barris show or something.
Oh God, Chuck Barris, boy, that goes back a ways.
Well, he
I
had a
mean,
show called All New Three's a Crowd. I announced the reboot of it, All New Three's a Crowd, with which is not that many years ago. With I'm trying to remember the name, Alan Thicke. Alan Thicke. hosted.
yes,
Yeah, but originally it was a Chuck Barris show back in the 70s, and it was like a husband, a wife, and his secretary, and who knows who better. Ooh, very titillating.
it almost sounds like what we were talking about before we got on the air.
Well, I won't
Yes,
disclose that either. Yeah.
yes. There's a DNA involved in this one, kid. But you have had the opportunity to work with
Oh
some of the
boy.
people that I consider to be some of the finest game show hosts ever.
Yes.
Game show announcers, Rod Riley, uh,
Charlie O'Donnell, Johnny
Charlie
Olson,
Olson.
Johnny Gilbert. I mean, these are my folks.
What's the common thread amongst first the announcers? What do you guys all share in common that makes you want to be number one in radio to begin with, Randy West? I know what I wanted to be in radio for, the girls. But but what and actually I love radio. What I loved about radio the most, Randy,
Hmm.
was it's like reading a book. The car drives down the street. You can imagine any kind of car you want. You can imagine any color you want. Whereas if you see it on film or television, all right, it's a Buick, it's red. Okay, fine. Radio, let your imagination move out and enjoy and expand. But what was the common thread between you and Johnny and all the other guys that were famous and brilliant announcers?
Well, thank you. I don't always feel I believe in that realm of those
No,
other
come on,
folks,
Randy,
but-
come on. You're one of the, listen, Randy, you're
Well,
not only have been a friend to me, but you're truly a gentleman and a total professional.
well, I thank
At
you
least
for
that's what the people at the reality TV thing told me.
I don't have enough money to keep buying that praise anymore. But
Okay.
what does it take? Well, it's a love for the business, first and foremost. Now, Johnny Olson came to it as a host in the earliest days of television, but he's a little older, and as television matured and the look was more important, and age was a significant factor, he branched into announcing. The same is true for Johnny Gilbert. He had been a host and a vocalist, a singer. So, he came to it from another place. Charlie O'Donnell was a pure radio guy who moved in as an announcer. And I think I followed that path more than anything else. What does it take? Well, obviously, the ability to read out loud.
Yeah.
It takes a love of the business, which is easy for me. I mean, I'm just so passionate about it. And the ability to get along with people because you're working hand in hand with a host. For example, use Bob Barker. Randy, tell us about our prize. And he's looking at you for the read. He may say, "Now, Randy, what kind of car is that?" And he may come up with some ad lib thing. You need to be ready. So you need to have
Yeah.
the chemistry with these guys, and
Yes.
you need to be glib, for lack of a better term, to be able to roll with the punches. So it's in one hand, it's strictly performing chops. But
Yep.
on the other hand, and everyone is always very surprised to hear this, when you're announcing a television show, the biggest attribute you need to bring to the table is concentration. And I'm not talking about the old game show. I'm talking
No.
about concentration in this is what you're faced with. You're on headset because you don't just speak when you feel like it. You speak when the director says, cue announce or go Randy or something like that.
Yeah.
But while you're listening for your cue, he's also cueing the cameras, the lighting, the music, the videotape playback.
And you can lose your place at any time.
Everybody's on that line. So it sounds like, all right, everybody, good luck. We're coming up in 10. You count down to 5. Standby music, standby announce, standby lighting. We're coming up on 2. Ready, 3. Tighter on 4. Tighter 4. And cue announce music, go. And now you're reading or doing whatever it is you're doing. Stand by.
And well, here he is.
Yeah, all that good stuff. You know, from Television City in Hollywood, America's most, whatever the hell it is. But you're in your headset, and you can't take the headset off because some of these cues may belong to you. But you're hearing music up, standby 2, push 2. All right, roll VTR, take VTR 1, and lights go. Turn the turntable. Curtain. Everything in the world is being yelled at. And everyone else who's listening for their cue just has to perform a movement, a function.
You know what it reminds me of?
You're trying to talk and pay attention to what you're saying at the same time. So it's a significant challenge. It really is, the ability to concentrate on what you're saying, even though you're drowned out in your own head by all the screaming. Yeah.
You know what it reminds me of is when I was doing baseball and play-by-play and football play-by-play, because you hear in your headset, 30 seconds to commercial. All right, Gary, 30 seconds to commercial. Wind it up. Here we go. Here we go. For pre and post game shows, the same thing. You know, all right, you got 2 minutes to go with him. Go ask a couple questions, get in, get out. Then when I was a sideline reporter for the AFL, the Arena Football League, which is a fun league. I don't even know if it exists anymore. But yeah, you'd hear the same thing in your headset, and you have, concentration is the utmost, because if you miss your cue, they'll give it to you once, but you better not miss it the second time, because they'll say, you're gone. I'll find somebody else tomorrow morning.
It's what I love about television is that it's all an all-star team. These are folks, no matter what the position is, if you will, to use the baseball analogy, first base, second base, shortstop, whatever. If you're doing light, if you're a stage manager, if you're music, all these technical director, assistant director, all these people are tops at what they do. They've paid a lot of dues. They've risen to the top, and it's an all-star team. And when that ball comes to you, you're expected to field it, get it to first base, or however you want to work the analogy. But when it's cue Randy, you need to be there. You need to get it right. And what I love about it is camera guys or other folks will come up to me and say, man, how do you do that? You're just always, precise with the timing, because people are also counting down in your head, 7, 6, 5. You need to finish what you're reading right in time with what they're doing. So they say to me, how do you do that? And I say, how do you do what you do? I mean, that to me seems even more of a challenge. You got people who know lighting, who know angles, who know I mean, if you watch a director work, I mean, some of this stuff to me is just awe-inspiring, but to see somebody handle these things well. So while there's respect for what I do, I have equal or more respect for what everyone else is doing. All-star team is the point I'm making. And there's really no room for imperfection or slip-ups, because there's a long line of people behind you.
Randy West is joining us here on Main Street. Gary Allen with you. Tommy, would you put up Randy's website, please? If there's more information you want to know about my dear friend Randy West, there it is, tvrandywest.com. Yes, it is. Mr. TV himself. I know.
And that's also, you mentioned the book also. This is exactly where you can get the books that I've written. And this one is a trip. TV Inside Out.
Yes.
Frame up there a little bit. Flukes, Flakes, Feuds, and Felonies. And it's amazing stories of the people that you've loved watching on TV your whole life, from all the way back to I Love Lucy right up to today, and the backstage stories of absolute insanity.
Can you give us a couple of juicy ones? Oh,
yeah. Well, there was a Mafia hit on Desi Arnaz. Would you believe that? When he started producing The Untouchables for Desilu,
that's
Al Capone's widow called and said, my husband's name's been dragged through the mud way too many times. I wouldn't do that show if I were you. And he said, it's a bestseller. I bought the rights. If I don't do it, someone else will. And lo and behold, she put a hit out on him. And it was just a few days from the trigger being pulled until Sam Giancana said, I'm withdrawing that because you need permission from a lot of folks to hit somebody who's apparently high
Yeah.
profile.
Yeah.
And he
Yeah.
said, and she said, but he's dissing us. He's showing on the Untouchables all this mafia stories and using names and places. And he said, we don't want to be known as the people who killed Ricky Ricardo.
Hello,
Even,
Lucy. Hello,
yeah,
Lucy.
because
By the way,
it's
do you
too
want to know?
close.
There's a connection between you and I and
Yeah.
Mrs. Capone. I grew up in South Florida.
Yeah.
I
Sonny,
grew up
did you
with,
know Sonny
I
Capone?
knew Sonny, and I know
Yeah.
his entire family to this day. They own
Wow.
2 restaurants in South Florida, and they're named Capones.
Sure, sure.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah.
Sonny went to school with Jesse at one point, which made it
Yeah.
even a thicker story.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
$2 million extortion scheme against David Letterman. There's the time that Louis Anderson was being blackmailed for having approached a young man
Oh,
who,
yeah.
and that ended up with a screaming police chase in Beverly Hills because he didn't go in to make the payoff. An undercover cop went in and made the payoff, and the guy grabbed the envelope and ran out to a waiting truck and started a police chase. They threw guns out of the cab of the truck. I mean, it's amazing stuff. Stuff you would never realize that goes on behind the scenes. And there are publicists, an army of them, who try to keep this stuff out of the news.
Yes. By the way, I felt so bad at that time for Louis.
Yeah.
I knew Louis. I miss Louis. We've lost so many funny
Oh, yeah.
funny people in the world.
Yeah. Well,
And
Louis,
that
for those who don't know, was a warm, sweet, give you the shirt off, open his wallet to you if you needed something. I mean,
Yep.
he was just as kind as can be and just such a lovely human being. Came from a very tough background. And in preparing for this book, I've interviewed a lot of these folks, most of them. And
Yeah.
Louis told me that he was suicidal for one point, and he just wrapped the towel around his head because he didn't want to make a mess in the hotel room, and
and
then
so
decided against it.
and
Yeah.
so was Drew Carey.
Yes, yes, yes.
I
Well,
mean, isn't it sad, Randy, how many people in our business, whether you're an actor or a talk show host or announcer, people that are out there in public, but behind the scenes, depression, loneliness,
yeah,
wanting for love of some kind, because that's what it's all about.
yeah.
I mean, Jeffrey and I've talked about it many times. What was that famous thing about with Laurence Olivier when he was asked, "Why did you get involved in this business?" And he got up from his chair and he moved over to the talk show host and he goes, "Look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me. That's what it's all about."
Yeah.
He said, "That's the bottom line." And it's true. Look, I'm
Yeah.
not a good-looking guy by any stretch of the imagination. You're a very handsome fellow.
No,
But
I belong on the screen right there with you.
nah, come on. What I want to go back to real quick
Yeah.
is you began your career in New York. You used to show up at the tapings of a lot of game shows, which is where you
Yeah.
met Johnny,
Right.
Mr. Olson, and you began a wonderful, long, loving relationship between the two of you, like father and son, I guess would be the best way to
Yes.
describe it. And
Yes.
he was very helpful in you getting going. Is that what it takes? I mean, I interned for Larry King, and Larry King was helpful to me getting jobs in South Florida in radio,
Mhm.
WIOD.
The
And
wonderful Isle of Dreams.
oh yes, a lot of people don't know that it's it's no longer there. It's inland now.
Oh,
Excuse me, I have a little bit of a cold, but yes, WIOD. I started out as an intern, and then I worked myself in to be one of his producers.
nice.
And I've known many, and he was very helpful. My uncle, who was a comedian on Miami Beach, was helpful. But once I left South Florida and I went to LA, which I didn't pursue radio, I bet you even back in the early 80s, I probably could have got myself into a radio station doing anything just to get in the door and probably could have worked my way up. But I didn't, like a dummy. I was, oh no, I'm doing Hill Street Blues. I'm doing St. Elsewhere. Oh no, I'm an actor. Yeah, bull crap, Gary. You're an announcer. That's all you've ever been. Larry King even said to me one day off of Fairfax, the delicatessen we used to have lunch at from time to time.
Cantors.
Cantors. He'd say, "Why are you even pursuing acting? You're not an actor. If you were a good actor, you'd already be successful. You're not. So go back to radio." I said, "Well, who do you know?" He said, "You want me to make some calls? I'll make them." I said, "I'll let you know." And I never did, like a dummy. But bottom line is, does it take a mentor now, like what you had with Johnny Olson and a few others,
Well,
to really
I
help you break the door down?
I believe that's probably the best way to go. I don't know how you break the door down otherwise. What's the in? Well, I do know that I did attract attention with game show producers appearing as a contestant. I appeared on 9 different game shows just because I wanted to be around it when I first came to town and to meet the producers. And, if you do well on a game show, you're a good game player. They call some of those folks back to play new games that are in development. Trying to create rules and create a format. They'll invite you back because they know you're a good game player. And
Right.
you go through office run-throughs and stuff like that. So I did knock down some doors, hobnobbing and hanging out with producers in these development sessions. So
Yeah.
that helped me as well. But Johnny was number one with a bullet as far as
What was he
telling me
like?
everything I needed to know. He never got me a
Yeah.
job. Never got me a job. Never even
Really?
offered, and I didn't even want to ask him. No, but he gave me everything I needed to know. We met when I was a teenager. He had no kids of his own, so it was a father-son kind of a thing. Put me in his warm-up, encouraged me, gave me old scripts, etc. back in New York. He left in 1972 to announce The Price is Right here in Los Angeles, and I was still in radio bouncing around the country. But in 79, 7 years later, I came out to LA with a radio job, and now we're together adult to adult. Obviously way older than I was, but I wasn't a teenager anymore.
Yeah.
So we would go to lunch and he explained why I say this, why I do that. You want to make this happen. You want to think about that, doing that. I mean, everything. Gave me an encyclopedic knowledge of
Yeah.
what it is he does, what's the important part of the job, and how to perform it. And that was priceless. And I'll tell you how it really paid off. It was quite amazing. I was doing The Price is Right, filling in for Rod Roddy, 2003.
Talk
Many
about a
years
colorful
ago.
figure.
Well, Rod was also from radio. We knew each other when he was at WKBW in Buffalo, and then came out here in Los Angeles a few years before me.
Yeah.
Very colorful character and very much excited to be working in game shows. This is Roddy speaking. So Rod took ill, as how strange I'd be filling in for a friend. But
Yeah.
the first day of filling in for Rod was sort of like an audition for what was an audition. They gave me a week of
Yeah.
shows to do, and the producer's watching me, and a couple of other people are watching me, and I'm thinking to myself, all these people watching me, they've got jobs to do. What are they standing around looking at me for? And I felt like maybe I said something during warm up. You're loose and ad-libbing and speaking extemporaneously. Did I say something that might have been offensive or in some way inappropriate? And it's, of course, you're doing the show. You can't stop and tell the audience, hey, I'll be right back. I want to go talk to the producer. No way. So there's an hour and 20 minutes between whatever it is I said or
Yeah.
did during warm up and the chance to say to the producer, hey, I'm sorry if I was, he says, no, you don't understand. We were all watching you because you were channeling Johnny. Wow. So what he was saying to me is, when Rod did the show, Rod was always on the stage. He would do the warm up from the stage and address
Right.
the people. I was down in the pit with the sunken audience, they're below stage level. And I'm down there touching and talking and walking and dancing. And the things that I was saying were not the things that Johnny said, because there were decades between us, but the approach, the style, the wherewithal, the energy,
Wow.
no cynicism, no sarcasm, the kind of jokes you do, the way you hold yourself, the way you walk and talk. You were channeling Johnny, which is a phenomenal, unbelievable compliment, because he was the best, hands down.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
What was he like away from the curtain? I mean, what was Johnny
Yeah.
like when he was home with he and the missus? And maybe I'm sure you went over to their house for dinner a few times, but what was Johnny like? Was he laid back, quiet?
Yeah. Yeah. He was really a family man, his dogs and his hobbies. And, he talked all day long, so it wasn't necessary for him to be expounding, in the evening. But they had a
Yeah.
lovely relationship. These are Midwestern folks. These are God's people, if you will. He grew up in Windham, Minnesota. The family lived in Wisconsin for a while. So this is Middle America, very straight laced. There was a great deal of spirituality in the household.
Right.
The wife
Right.
had sung hymns, had some albums in which she sung hymns. So it was very, very Americana, I guess is the best word to put it. That doesn't mean a foul word never came into his mouth or anything like that. That's not what I'm trying to paint him as an angel. But he
No.
was a good guy. And the biggest thing about Johnny is, and I asked him, how do you he said to me, Randy, don't ever leave the studio until everybody who wants to talk to you from the audience has a chance, because you're their ambassador to show business. And I'm
Yep.
like, talk to everybody in the audience. My God, he says, but it's an important part of your job. And after I did that a couple of times, I said, how does he do this? And the bottom line of it, Johnny loved people. He just loved people, talking, learning, interacting. He loved people. And I said, how is it that you have such an affinity for people? And this was an interesting answer. And it's true. He said, I grew up with 10 brothers and sisters, 11
Wow.
kids, in a 1-bedroom farmhouse. If I couldn't get along with people, I wouldn't have survived. Interesting answer. But
Yeah.
yes, they came dirt poor. There was a dairy farmer. The father worked on the highways. It was just, it was a very humble upbringing. And he always remained humble, if you will, in touch with that part of him that learned how to live your life and how to interact with people in a small town. You can't go shooting off your mouth like you might do in New York or LA, so
How can we get a hold of your book on Johnny Olson?
TVRandyWest.com. There you go. It's 400 pages, 100 photos from Johnny. Now, this is material interesting because this is not how biographies generally begin. Johnny started to write his autobiography. And when the wife was put into a nursing home, the nephew said, are you the Randy West that corresponded with Johnny? They found my name and number and stuff. And they sent me everything that Johnny had saved over his 58-year career, which is phenomenal. Microphones, Emmy plaques, and all sorts of clippings, and an autobiography he started to write. So it's a book based on his outline and the stories he told, one-to-one, face-to-face, person-to-person. So, and it goes all the way back to his infancy with the family and all that, because it was material that he'd been writing. So it's sort of, the book he would have written about himself.
Can you give us a quick story that's in there, that's something that would...
Oh my God! Well, a million stories. I think the coolest thing was the relationship that he had with superstars. He worked with Frank Sinatra. He worked every week with Jackie Gleason from the Sun and Fun capital of the world, Miami Beach. The Jackie Gleason. So he had great advice for me, which is friendly but not familiar. Don't go to their barbecues. Don't go to their house. There's a certain professional respect and distance. And, they may feel like they want to invite you to everything because it's the right thing to do, but you're better off just, friendly and cooperative and all that. But don't get too familiar because it's a business. And that was the biggest lesson I learned. It all seems like a giant party to folks at home and in the studio, how having a great time. It's work, and it's a business, and it's a high stakes business. There's a lot of money involved, not just in salaries, but whether this show goes or gets canceled. It's millions of dollars on the line. It's a business. And I think that's the most important thing that I learned from him.
Yeah, I kind of learned that early too from Larry. He was like, yes, I'm friendly with a lot of the people that I have on the show. I don't party with them. Some I might invite over to house at dinner when he lived in LA more than he did in Miami. But his advice to me was, in LA in particular, if you got to work with so-and-so, work with them, enjoy them, even talk to them every now and then, but don't become that familiar with them. The only family that I ever became familiar with when I moved to LA was Dean Martin and his family.
Oh, nice.
And I was there for every Christmas. I was there for every holiday, and stuff like that.
Well, then that Dean used to leave his own parties.
You go upstairs,
right? And he go sometimes call the police if the party ran too late. Call them to break up the party. Claim to be a neighbor.
Because he would go to play golf the next morning, because people don't know this about Dean, but that show that he did, the Dean Martin show, he showed up on Sunday, no rehearsals, no nothing. That's what made it great.
Yeah,
that's what made it great.
He demanded that kind of schedule and figured they'd never say yes to that, and they did. And Greg Garrison moved him from place to place. He used to put his hands on his shoulder, position him here, position him there. These are your lines. Go read it. And they did it all pretty much in one take because they only had him for a few hours each week. It was an amazing show.
Randy West is joining us here on Main Street. Gary Allen with you. I want to go through some pictures with you, if we could, sir.
Sure.
Tommy, if you want to start putting those up, I want to go through those with Randy and see. Randy, this was recently for you, the Reality TV Awards.
Yeah, this is
Can't
airing this
tell.
coming Friday, right, from the, fabulous Avalon in Hollywood, which is the old Hollywood Palace, if you remember that old
Ooh,
show.
yes,
It's
yes.
that same facility, and as I mentioned before, it's everybody from, not just reality, but unscripted television up for
Yeah.
awards. I think there's something like 30 different categories, and the nominees are there, and the winners, and all that fun stuff. Yeah, so
Okay.
that airs Friday. Mhm.
Next. Oh, this is
Well,
your
that's
book?
the book, yeah, which is full of stories of not only the people on the cover, but backstage from The Price is Right, Merv Griffin and Oprah Winfrey. There's stories about
Ooh,
all of these people. And Jay Leno, I'll give you a real quick one because I see his picture up there now. Jay Leno was arrested in Hollywood when he first came to town for
yes.
vagrancy. He
And
was
that's where
hanging
his
out.
star is on the Star of Fame.
There you go.
Jay and I have known each other since we were 9 years old. I
Hmm.
knew him before it was Jay Leno back in
Yeah.
those
Was he
days.
up in back in Boston, New England
Yes,
those days?
apparently
Yeah.
one of my aunts purchased a life insurance policy from his father. His father was an
Yeah.
insurance salesman, and back in
Right.
those days, they didn't have an office. They went around in their car from
Hmm.
town to town to town, and apparently that's how that happened. Now, I haven't seen or talked to Jay in a long time. There he is, Mr. Olson himself.
Yeah, this is the guy who started at the very beginning of television. In fact, he was on camera in experimental television when General Electric was fooling around up in Schenectady, New York, before anyone had heard of television.
Yeah.
And he came up as a host on a number of shows. He started to do radio programs that brought him to television. And the coolest thing, or the most respectful thing I could tell you about Johnny, is as a host, he was getting old. The ratings were an important thing. And they said to him, Johnny, we're going to take you off camera. Now, two things could have happened. One would have been what I might do if I hadn't thought it through, which is, what the hell are you talking about? I invented this freaking thing. I was here before any of you guys, and
Yeah.
blah, 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 blah. But what Johnny did was took
No.
lemonade. He took the off-camera position, and took lemons and made lemonade out of it, I guess is the best way to say it. And he
A total
became
pro.
tops at his craft.
A total pro.
Yeah,
A
completely.
total pro. Here we
Well,
go.
there's Norman Lear at his 98th, I want to say. He made it
Yeah.
past 100 and had all his marbles, completely with it, totally aware. And in fact, he was pitching a remake of One Day at a Time during the year that he was 100 years old. He's out there
Yeah.
pitching shows. A brilliant man. It gave us so much great television. Yeah.
Next. There.
Peter
Uh,
Marshall's memorial. Peter Marshall's memorial was just a few days ago.
yes. That's why I wanted to put that up there because
Yeah.
I loved Hollywood Squares. I actually, through a company you and I have both worked for, Game Show America, we
Uh-huh.
both have done Hollywood Squares, I think, for Matt King. Have we not?
Yep, or variations of it because we don't want to be calling it Hollywood Squares, but yes,
Yeah,
the
variations of
format.
it.
Yeah, we
Ye-
vary the format. But Peter, I'll tell you, Peter was a Broadway actor.
Yep.
Peter, everything from Skyscraper to La Cage aux Folles over the course of many decades. He was a big band singer. He was a radio host. He was a nightclub comedian. He was
Right.
part of a comedy act. There's everything in the world that this guy has done, and you never saw anybody not only as talented in so many different ways, but as kind and warm, gentle, soft, loving, great sense of humor, but so endearing. And the times I spent with him are just so beautiful. And the memorial they had, I can't begin to tell you who showed up. Michael
Yeah.
Feinstein sang, and
Wow.
I mean, it was Hal Linden and
Oh, wow.
Barbara Eden, and I mean, I'm just
Barbara.
coming up with some classic names, but there were dozens of people of that ilk, of that status, who
He
were at that
was
memorial.
he was the best host for that show, Hollywood Squares. I think the banter between him and Paul Lynde will go down in TV history. There's so many to remember, but the one that I remember the most is there was one about why do butchers pound their meat. Paul had a very interesting answer to that. But he asked Paul one day, he said, Paul, why do the Hells Angels wear leather? And without skipping
Yeah,
a beat, Paul goes, because
because
chiffon
chiffon wrinkles.
wrinkles,
Yes.
I mean, there was nobody like Paul Lynde, and I got to meet Paul through my uncle Tubby. A
Wait a
number
minute,
of times.
stop. Your uncle is Tubby Boots?
Yeah. Well, was.
Well, sorry to
Yeah.
hear that, but oh my God, a legend in comedy in Florida. Yes.
Yes.
Legend, South Florida.
Yeah.
I had
That's
no
why
idea.
he always said to me, don't ever become a comic, Gary, because you ain't funny. Your impressions are great, but you ain't funny, So I
Well,
tried some comedy, and he was right. Even though Bud Friedman said, "God bless you, I'm going to keep putting you on the stage, as much as I possibly can." Next picture, please. Here we
well,
go.
there's 50 years of game show. I'll try to avoid you having to
Ed
solve
McMahon is in the
those.
back because I worked with Ed in Vegas.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
Bob
well,
Eubanks.
they're all there. Charlie O'Donnell on the far left. You Bet
Yep.
Your Life and The Creative Truth or Consequences is right behind me. Ralph Edwards. Next to him is Tom Kennedy. Tom Kennedy's brother, Jack Nars, is the gray-haired gentleman holding the sign. Bob Eubanks from Newlywed Game next to him. And then next down the line, also holding the sign, is Betty White, Ed
Yes.
McMahon, Alex Trebek, Peter Marshall, and Bill Armstrong.
Yes.
So this was an all-star collection of that. Unfortunately, I'm here to tell you there are very few of these guys remaining. Bob Eubanks and not Peter anymore. So that's it. I'm still alive, but that's it. That's
Who
it.
was? I've talked to every game show host, including Ed McMahon, when we worked together in Vegas doing the slot machine shows and stuff like that. Who was the best game show announcer, or best game show host, excuse me? Now, Wink Martindale told me his, and I love Wink. He's been on
I
this
know what
show.
every game show host will tell you, Bill Cullen.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a simple answer. Bill could handle any format. He was brilliant and had a great editor within his head. A million lines would come to him. He just used the stuff that made the contestants look good. And he was witty as hell and truly the best with any format.
And he passed away way too young.
Oh, yeah. Well, smoking. A lot of these guys went to smoking.
Same as Betty White's husband.
Yeah, Alan Ludden. Yeah,
Alan
well,
Ludden
he has
died.
stomach cancer. He has stomach cancer as well. It might have been a metastasis. But,
Yeah, something like that. Next picture, please.
Okay, and there's Drew Carey.
There's
Yeah,
Mr. Carey. Mr. Marine himself.
And a very generous guy. My goodness, working with him is a treat. He's very, very generous. He doesn't do the show the way Bob Barker did, which some hardcore Barker fans find objectionable. Like he's not supposed to follow.
My producer's a hardcore
did.
Barker fan.
Yeah. Well, that's good because working with Bob was a trip, and Bob was truly a great, great host.
You have worked for a lot of companies like CBS, NBC, ABC, Game Show Network.
Yeah, I can't keep a job. That's the problem.
Yeah, that's the problem. It's like my mother said to me, my first 3 radio jobs in Miami. She said, "What's wrong with you? Can't you hold on to a job?" I said, "Mom, if you aren't fired within the first 6 months in radio, there's something really wrong with you. You really need to get fired." But you worked for the Todman Corporation for
Goodson
Mark,
Todman. Yeah.
Goodson Todman. Talk about that relationship because it was a long relationship.
Wow. Bill Todman was pretty much in the background. He was a money guy and represented the company to the ad agencies and that sort of stuff. But Mark Goodson was a disc jockey going back to KSFO in San Francisco when he was a young man during college. And he was the great editor of formats. He wasn't necessarily the most creative guy around the table, but he could troubleshoot and edit and hone a format like anyone else. Nobody else, I should say. I mean, he could see the trouble spots that could develop. And he was came from very poor background, very dirt poor. Father went through multiple different jobs. And I think, and I know that he carried a lot of that insecurity and less than with him. Even though he was a multi-millionaire, he still somehow felt that he never had the respect of the New York literati, because his place in television wasn't PBS. It was the low rent district. As far as, again, the high polloi, the people of society. So he always felt like he was one less than. But in the world of game shows, he was the king.
Yes, he was.
Rightfully so. And he paid well, and he respected those people who were creative. He surrounded himself with a coterie of people that was very much like the old studio system, where they remained under payroll. Even if they didn't have a show on the air at the moment, they would contribute to other programs and new ones that were being developed, pulling a full salary. He wanted these people in his corner. And in that way, it was like the studio system. If you were there, you could be there for life. And his Christmas bonuses were not to be believed. I mean, back 30, 40 years ago, checks for $100,000 would go to some of his producers as Christmas bonuses. So bring a man, but being with him was interesting. He was, all his clothing was bespoke, custom made. His office, he had Picasso's, and I said, "Oh, I recognize that painting." He says, "Well, you've never seen it that way." And I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "That's the original." He had original Picasso's in his office. He worked off of Napoleon Bonaparte's desk. Okay.
Ooh.
So a lot of money, and he wanted everyone to know that he had arrived.
Yeah.
But a brilliant man, a brilliant man.
Yeah. And I would imagine that, again, you said it stems from humble beginnings. I know that my good friend Jay Leno and Will Schreiner and I and others, and believe me, I slept in my car for about 2 months when I first got to LA. Even though my mom and dad were picking up my hotel bill, I quit using their credit card for my hotel bill. I used to, by the Magic Castle, there was those little hotels up there, you could rent for a week. Yeah. And I eventually said, I can't continue to do this. So I went and slept in my car. My father found out through somebody about it. And he said, "You stop it. You're not going to get anywhere that way." And I was lucky. I eventually got a roommate who was an engineer at A&M Records, or at the time, or the old Charlie Chaplin Studios down the street on La Brea. Right. Which, by the way, I was there for the night of We Are the World. I actually got to watch that being done.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, that was very cool. Game shows are not cheap to put up. They're not super expensive. They're not like a reality show where they're fairly inexpensive to put up. What does it take nowadays? I know some game shows are back. If you look at the GSN network and things along those lines, what does it take? First, you have to have a brilliant game. Okay. You have to have a great host, I would imagine. But what else needs to go into it to make a game show, what it is? What makes The Price is Right what it is? What made Wheel of Fortune what it is?
Easy. The word is play along. It's a game that compels you at home to participate, to yell at the TV screen, if you will, guessing the price, guessing the puzzle. Now, Wheel of Fortune is laid out in such a way these players are guessing letters and spinning wheels while you have a chance to see the puzzle. So the trick there is for you to solve the puzzle before the people on the show, because there's involved with other activities. You're not spinning a wheel and all that stuff. So if you can shout the answer at the TV screen, hopefully before the contestants, that's the recipe for success. Play along. You watch an item on The Price is Right. I know that's 39 cents. I bought that last week or whatever, and that's it. Play along. You need to involve the folks and have them. The contestant selection is important too, because you want the folks at home to relate to that person. He's in the military. Oh, my brother's in the military. Some way to feel a kinship with the folks on the air. So those folks are excited, yes, but they're also accessible emotionally. They wear their heart on their sleeve, so you see their emotional gyrations and you can relate to them. Play along, relatability of contestants.
Yeah, exactly. Randy West is our guest here on Main Street. Gary Allen with you, Randy.
I'm going to give you a piece of news. I'm going to interrupt your programming just to bring you a piece of information. I think
this is Gary Allen with the CBS Evening News. And now let's go to our correspondent in LA, Mr. Randy West. Randy, what do you got for us?
Gary, I'm proud to tell you that, Television City in Hollywood has been on the map and producing shows for 72 years. It was sold recently, and the new owners have, through a convoluted set of circumstances, have brought me in now, and I'm working with the new owners of Television City. It started with my advocacy for preservation of the studios where all the great television shows came from. And now I'm giving tours for them, for their invited guests. Television City hasn't had tours since the 1950s, but we've opened it up now, and we walk through all the control rooms and all the backstage workings, and it's a thrill. And through that, I've been given access to the entire building, which brought me to call my publisher and say, how would you like a book called From Television City in Hollywood? Secrets of the Studios, or some other subtitle. And it took about 4 seconds, and he said, write it, I buy it. And now I'm writing a book all about the shows. They go all the way back, all in the family, and every game show you ever saw, and the Smothers Brothers, and Carol Burnett, and Jack Benny, and Red Skelton, and Glenn Campbell, and Cher, and Sonny and Cher, all these great shows have a legacy there. Some of the workers who are behind the scenes have been there for 40 years. Their stories, the file keeping, the record keeping, the photos, the layouts. I have access to all of this now. So I started writing the book, and a game show host that some people may remember, his name was Jim McCrell, and he hosted Celebrity Sweepstakes a million years ago. But Jim is a friend, has been for decades, and said, Randy, you're an idiot. It's not a book, or maybe it is a book, but it's a documentary.
Yes.
It's a feature film.
Yes, it is.
Independent documentary film where we take a camera through Television City and you explain this is where Judy Garland had her mobile home that they set up to look like the yellow brick road. So she would feel like, all these interesting stories of the stars and the shows and the layout and the way the place came to be. When they built Television City Studios, I should say, less than 1% of American households had a TV.
Yeah.
So Bill Paley, who ran CBS, had the foresight of his experience with radio. It turns into a network that begins billions of dollars, through advertising with the stars. He saw what happened to radio in a short period of time and said, I'm getting in on the ground floor and I'm building this factory out in Los Angeles. Even though nobody had a TV set, he saw the future. By the time they went on the air in 1952, 34% of American households had a TV. So the growth was very quick. And he was there with the first factory. What I mean by that is you never leave. It's a city. That's why it's called Television City. You walk in with a script and money, and you end up with a show on the air. Wardrobe, casting, set construction, everything happens there without ever having to leave the premises. And that was brand new at the time. So the run of CBS Television City in Hollywood is a thrill for me, and the opportunity to give tours and write a book. And now we're talking with documentary filmmakers. So I'm very hopeful that by a year or two from now, you'll have the chance to see some of the things that I've seen, which is how the great television shows that are in our memory came to be. And what did Carol Burnett's dressing room look like? From the small questions like that to the larger issues of how did these great shows come to be?
Exactly. And I remember going over there because I worked at a sporting goods store that was right there in Farmers Market. And I remember seeing that. And one day, one of the cast members that I got to know very well from Y&R, because I used to film that there, along with the Bold and the Beautiful.
Still do.
Yeah. Are they still there?
It's both still there. They're going to leave for construction because these new owners are going to be refiguring the 25 acres, but they have a long-term contract. Those two shows will be back when the construction's done. Yes, they're there, and it's 42 years.
But I got to go in and see the sets on Y&R and everything else like that. And, and I remember asking one of the actors, I said, how do you memorize the lines? They said, it's not easy. It becomes easier as you go along, but it's not easy. And I remember watching the lines for The Price is Right, people going in. And by the way, we've got about 5 minutes left here. I got two questions for you, but do the game shows still, were they produced the same as like Match Game, where it was on Saturday and Sunday, 5 shows on the weekends, and they do that for 3 or 4 weekends out of the month, then they'd go away, then they'd come back? Are shows still done that way to this
Even
day?
more so, if you will, because 5 shows a day used to be a big deal. It's not anymore. People go for 6 and 7. It's economy, it's a money thing. They go for 6 or 7 at a time. Dick Clark, when he did the pyramid way back, $10,000, $100,000 pyramid, he did 10 shows a day. 10 shows. And number one, show 1 and show 10, you couldn't tell the difference in his energy.
Well, he was a total.
Just a machine. And I worked with him as well. And it was a learning experience watching him do what he does. But yes, 7 shows is the norm now. And take The Price is Right, where they used to do, when I was doing it, did 2 1 hours a day with Bob Barker, sometimes 1 a day because of his age. When Drew came in, they went back to 2 a day. Now they're at 3 a day. And they're trying to get 4 a day in the can, which is a long day and a lot of work. And the same is going on at Let's Make a Deal now.
Two final questions to you. One, how is AI going to take care of, how is it going to influence the business?
Well, that's a great question. Eventually, I guess you'll have a robot host. It'll all be, virtual reality, artificial, whatever. That's not coming anytime soon. But what I do see happening is replacing announcers. SAG-AFTRA just is still on strike with game producers, video game producers,
Yeah, right.
because they want to sample our voices and then use them in perpetuity on every other game they decide to come up with for the next millennium, and pay you one time. So that's a big issue now with voiceover. I can still hear the difference with some stuff that I hear that is already AI, but eventually that's going to be perfected, and a lot of folks are going to be behind the eight ball. Some of the contracts are signed already through SAG-AFTRA, which means if you use my voice to reposition it, to repurpose it, you're still going to have to pay me, and you're going to have to get my permission.
Yeah.
So that's a major step for talent, but the handwriting's on the wall. Eventually, it's going to cost jobs. That's the bottom line.
Final question to you.
Yeah.
With all the success that you have had, and you have had tremendous success with all the people you have met, when Randy West is at home as you are now, or you're driving in your Mercedes, which I know you have a beautiful Mercedes, or you're out by yourself, grocery shopping, whatever,
Right.
and your mind is thinking, who's Randy West? Who's that little boy inside? Is he still there? Or is Randy West a different person? I mean, who is Randy West that, well, right now he's getting a jingle, but who is Randy West?
That's a great question. When you started to ask it, my mind went blank, but it's simple. It's simple. I wouldn't have the same passion you're seeing now. I wouldn't still be working. I still wouldn't be hireable. I still wouldn't be dedicated unless that little boy was still there. And I'll flash back to exactly the little boy who's there. I was 3 years old. I was watching Peter Pan, which when I was a kid was a big, Mary Martin did it for television. It was a Broadway show, and she did a production for NBC. I didn't see the original, but I saw a kinescope replay of it. And I was so enthralled with watching something on television that when the show was over, I jumped off the chair trying to fly. I'm 3 years old, and I bruised my nose and started to cry because I couldn't fly like Peter Pan. The stuff that was on that screen was real to me. And when I sat in front of the glass, everybody on the other side was happy. Now think about this. When you watch TV, singers, dancers, jugglers, comedians, you name it, everybody's happy. It's a happy place. Now, in all our childhoods, not necessarily everything was happy. That's true for everybody, some more than others. But I would sit in front of that screen and want to be behind the glass. I want to be there. And then I discovered, idiot, all you got to do is get on the train, go down to 30 Rockefeller Plaza, and you could be behind the glass. So the minute I was 14 and could lie and say I was 16, I was behind the glass with Johnny Olson, and I never wanted to leave. So who's Randy West? The kid who wants to be on the other side of the glass. And I am so lucky and so thrilled that any part of that dream came to be.
That'd be a great book, The Kid Behind the Glass.
Hey.
Randy, I want to thank you very much. This hour has gone by very quickly. And please do me a favor, because when we get through with this interview, I want you to stay right where you are. I have one question for you off camera. But I want to thank all of you out there for taking the time to join us today. Tommy, I want to thank you very much, the Japanese Gardens of South Florida, for their continued support on this particular program. Next week, we have another great show for you. And until we meet again, please take care of yourselves and each other.